I was angry the 4 days I spent in New Haven, Connecticut in 2012. I was angry that a few days after getting engaged, my editor called me and told me to pack a bag. I was angry that instead of being with loved ones, people I barely knew sang me happy birthday in a hotel bar over a shared piece of red velvet. When I finally got to leave the aftermath of one of our country's largest school shootings, I was angry that I left behind an entire community who would not have 26 of their loved ones with them on Christmas morning. I still get angry when I think how someone at a party told me I heard the whole thing was made up. And that is why storytelling matters. Throughout my career in newspapers, I chased emergency lights, whether they were responding to a burning home, a fatal crash, or a shooting. I knocked on the door asking the mother if she wanted to talk about her son gunned down in the street. I woke up Saturday morning to call a husband asking if he wanted to talk about his wife killed in a crash the night before. I've had plenty of slammed doors and hang-ups. And then I've had others who say yes. They've been waiting for someone to ask them, what was he like? Why did you love her? How will you go on? It doesn't take long to realize that for those people, being a journalist meant opening the door to a place in their hearts that sometimes friends or family were afraid to go. They tiptoed around the pain, never going beyond the surface. But storytellers don't do that. We dig, we have to. That's where the story is. It turns out that sometimes journalists have to do their own digging at times. They call this therapy, and I've been in it ever since coming home from Sandy Hook. For years, my pen carried the responsibility of capturing someone else's story. Today, it helps me tell my own story. And let me tell you about the character development. I was born the second oldest of 6 kids. We were all homeschooled, and I became a second mother in the home, as one often does in a big family. I knew even then that I would be a writer. My notebooks were filled with diary entries and poems, all things I am embarrassed to find in my parents' attic today. Those early stories were a young girl trying to make sense of heavy thoughts, of shame and guilt and parts of herself she didn't feel anyone understood, and not a lot has changed. I'm a mother who struggles with trying to be a productive business owner while making sure she invests enough time in raising her kids. Unoriginal. I'm proud of the woman who wore blazers and heels pre-COVID, but I'm also proud of the woman who battled postpartum depression in the middle of a pandemic while fearing for months her business might end. She's a pretty kick-ass lady. My story still unfolds as I work to undo generational trauma, introduce myself to my inner child, and be open about the ongoing anxiety I have in my life. And through it all, I realize no one is coming to ask me those deeper questions. I mean, my therapist is there, but she's not going to craft my story for me. Instead, I've asked myself those questions. What experiences have shaped me? Which memories mean the most? How do I want this story to unfold? And I share it in conversations with friends, unafraid of how people may view it on social media, and sometimes in front of groups like this. As someone recently told me, vulnerability might be my superpower. When I open up to tell my story, to be vulnerable, I'm often surprised at the way people respond, almost in the same relief my story subjects used to have when they finally got to bare themselves. But instead, I'm telling people about how I ate tasty cakes the entire pandemic and now have to buy a bigger pant size. Or I don't really know what I'm doing when it comes to raising my kids. There is no village. They lied to us. Sometimes I'm even sharing that I might be the president of a business, serve on several boards, and manage a couple of employees. But I also take medication for anxiety, and my team knows I see a therapist every other Thursday. More recently, through some extra therapy, I've finally been able to talk about the sexual abuse I experienced as a kid. It was a story I thought was mine to bear for almost 30 years. It took a lot of work to even be able to utter those words tonight. Those are the kind of stories that can set us free. I'm stopped at the grocery store and at my last networking event or in my office and thanked. Because I told my own story, and it turned out parts of it were their stories too. No one had ever asked them to tell it. I thought telling my own story was for my relief. It was my outlet. And now I think it's my responsibility. Storytelling brings me a sense of peace, but it also helps others know their stories matter too. Many of us will never have a storyteller come along and shape the words for us. But we do need to keep telling our stories. Because they connect us, because they make us human, that's why storytelling matters.